Pretty colors, huh? I'm in love with this pink and yellow at the moment. And I just want to sit here and finish this row, and then I'll be able to show you this. So give me a second and I'll be back. Hello. Good morning. My name is Sita, and this is the Shawl Knitter Unplugged. And today I'm in Cape Town at my daughter's home, and I'm trying to find the right spot to film this episode of the Shawl Knitter Unplugged. It's a bit difficult because all the surfaces are kind of a bit far away from me, so I'm just doing my best. If I sit on the bed and put the camera on a table on the bed, it's very wobbly when I knit, so I've had to make a plan. And I'm just going to have a little chat to you while I finish doing this row and tell you what I have to offer you today. So if you're visiting for the first time to the Shawl Knitter Unplugged, welcome. Thank you very much for coming along, and it would be lovely if you wanted to subscribe, and if you like the videos, if you could just press the like button, and if you want to be notified of all my videos that I post, you can click on the bell and you will get all the notifications. So I am basically what I call a nomad knitter, and a fiberista and a colorista. Basically anything to do with fiber and knitting, textiles, that's my thing. I'm a textile designer. I'm a qualified textile designer, and I have been working in various forms of fabric design, textile design, and knitwear design, and I am currently I think a compulsive knitter, maybe, but it's my way of working with color. I love color, all colors, not so much the neutral tones, definitely no black in my wardrobe, no white, very little of natural tones, but every now and again I do go for some sort of sandy, camel, grayish, putty, silver, and the likes, and I'll show you a few of those. So I primarily knit shawls. I do knit the odd sweater here and there, but I love shawls, and shawls to me are very large pieces of textile. So that is what I really love about them, is that one can manipulate a knitted textile and give it a beautiful drape and a shape and wear it in many different ways, and it's just fascinating. So just a little recap. I learned to knit, I don't remember when I learned to knit. Actually, I could knit probably when I was about 5 or 6. My grandmother, I know, taught me to knit, and I do remember knitting booties for my new baby sister when I was at the age of 7, and it's quite a complicated thing. I do remember making a total mess of them and pulling them out several times and starting them again, but I did get them right. And then I remember knitting a tank top. This must have been in like the 60s, 1960s. It was like a bumblebee black and yellow striped tank top, and it had a big star on the front of it. So I guess it was in Tasha, although it didn't have a name. My grandmother taught me how to do it, and I loved that item. I think the thing for me with knitting at such a young age was that I could create garments that I liked, things that I wanted to wear that nobody else had. And I had an interest in clothing and fashion and style from a very young age. And my grandmother was an amazing tailor, and I remember we lived with her for some years, and I would spend a lot of time at a very young age in her tailoring studio, sitting on the floor and pinning pieces of little scraps together and letting her sew them together on the machine for me, and using a darning needle and sort of loosely patching things together. But she would make me the most amazing outfits, and she would also make my dolls the most beautiful dresses. She was a very fine tailor, and I remember she made suits and wedding gowns, and people would be coming for fittings. So yeah, I grew up with a lot of creativity in my early youth. And my mother was also a very creative but more practical person. She could knit, and she could crochet, and she could sew, but somehow she never really got to teach me any of those crafts. And I think probably at the age of about 9, I learned how to use the sewing machine, and I started making clothing for myself. And I remember this particular kind of wraparound dress that was quite a simple garment to make. It actually had just sort of one piece of fabric maybe and 2 armholes, and then you wrapped it around, but you had to put a binding around everything, which was not a simple matter. But I remember making those dresses for myself and my 2 younger sisters. But I have always knitted, always. And I remember at school, in I guess what you call junior high, when I was sort of 12 and 13 and 14, I would take my knitting to school, and I went to a convent, a Catholic convent, and we would sit on the steps of the church and roll up our skirts and suntan our legs, and I would haul up my knitting. Nobody else was knitting, but that didn't really stop me. I loved it. So the long and the short of it is that I've knitted all my life. I've in between interspersed it with textile dyeing, textile printing, silk screening, having my own business, mostly in clothing and textiles, and knitwear. I've made knitted hats, which I've sold. I've made knitted bags, and currently I'm knitting shawls. So today might be a bit of a long episode because, as you may or may not know, I am about to embark on a wonderful journey. In less than 2 weeks, I will be leaving for India. I am currently in South Africa. That is the country of my birth. And I have been here now for 3 years during the lockdown period, and I will be returning to India, where I lived for 12 years. And I've sorely missed not being there. What with all the color and the crafts and the textiles, it's just a mysterious, mystical, magical place for me. And while I'm there, I carry on doing what I do, and I pick up new things, and I find gorgeous textiles, and I bring them back, and I trade. I sell them, and I take more stuff back, and I come back. So that's my life. I am a knitting nomad, and I love adventure, and I love India, and I've lived in some really beautiful, wild, natural, rural areas up in the Himalayas in Uttarakhand, where I can spend my days knitting and looking at the beautiful snow-capped mountains and living my life, which is quite a hands-on experience. When you live in rural India, you fetch water from the well, and everything is done by hand, and there's a lot of walking, and it's a lot of uphill walking because you live in the mountains, but it's a very slow pace, and I really, really love it. So I'm returning to some of those things, and I will tell you more about that later. I probably won't be making another episode of the Shawl Knitter Unplugged for a few weeks, as when I land in India on the 6th of February, I will be taking some people on a tour. That is something else that I do in India. So I will be embarking on a 2-week tour, which I really love to do. It's a very small group, and we are going to Rajasthan. We are in fact going to Jaipur, and to Jodhpur, to a beautiful music festival, and then we are taking one of the wonderful Indian trains. We're taking an overnight train to Rishikesh, which is on the banks of the Ganges River, very high up in the mountains, where it breaks through the gorges and the mountains, and it's fresh and ice cold, and it's just melted glaciers, and very clean and beautiful. And from there we're going to go by jeep higher up into the mountains on a beautiful journey, through beautiful passes and all those scary roads that you've seen on some of the videos that people show, that are high up the rivers, high up above the rivers with snow-capped mountains. We are going to travel up to where I used to live, in an area called Kasar Devi, which is what I call yarn or wool heaven. It's an area where there's a lot of wool, there's lots of natural wool. There is a sheep up there that is called Harsil, Harsil, which is used for mainly making blankets and coats and felted rugs and bed covers, and not much garments. They do make sweaters and things, but it's a very rough, not a soft wool. But there is some processing happening with some NGOs up there, and the quality of the wool is being processed now to make it much more commercially viable. And I have done some volunteer work there with a couple of NGOs, teaching knitwear design to some of the ladies in the villages, so that they can earn some extra money by selling their garments to the NGOs, who then distribute them at craft fairs throughout India, and also get orders, foreign orders, so to help these rather poor indigenous people who live in the very small villages and the farms, where subsistence farming is all that they really have. Helps them to earn some extra money and is much appreciated. So that's where I have been, and I've really loved working with the ladies there. Sometimes we can't speak each other's languages at all, so I've been teaching them how to work with circular needles and shawl design, and without a common language, which was actually quite a wonderful experience, really beautiful. And yes, I learned a lot myself. So that's just what's coming up for me. Then I'll be traveling to the south of India, and I will tell you more about that as we go along. So I won't be posting anything in the next few weeks, perhaps just some very short little shorts, which will be more documenting my journey and not really my knitting journey.